Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your mate Valstride, and today we are back with another tier list, this time to rank every single temple hero. Let's check it out. Alright, so let's start off with a couple of points of housekeeping. First of all, I do want to apologize for my voice. I've been sick for like the last 5 days, but the content has to keep rolling. And the other thing I want to say is overall, Temple has a fantastic roster of heroes. I think there are a lot of powerful options here. We're only going to have a few stragglers towards the bottom end of the power scale. So overall, I think they've done a great job balancing it. But that being said, I am typically quite harsh with my tier lists. I hate seeing tiers go completely unused on a tier list. That makes no sense to me. The only time I think you can really justify that is if you've got an in-between or middle tier that you think needs to be skipped because the power discrepancy is that significant. I hate seeing the bottom tier go unused. Even if something is good, it doesn't mean it can't be D tier. If something is literally worse than everything else on the list, you can always justify it being down in D tier, even if it's still viable, right? All of these heroes are potentially viable. You can and will win games with every single one of them, but it doesn't mean they're all just as good as one another. So with that being said, let's kick off the list and start talking about Ister. So this is going to be our movement specialist. He's going to give you plus 5% movement points for every 8 hero levels, and he's going to start the game with basic logistics. So that's a fantastic sub skill to start your game off with. Movement is the most valuable resource in the game, arguably. You can make a good case for that. If you can get ahead of your opponent in movement and make more progress on the map, you will get ahead in every other way. And for that reason, I am very, very comfortable putting Ister all the way up into S tier. I don't really have too many doubts about it. We'll see what kind of order this lands in a bit later. I will try and order it left to right, but let's see how the rest of the list plays out. Leon Sticky Fingers up next, and we've already got ourselves another movement specialist, but this guy is going to focus on scouting instead of basic logistics. So his movement takes no terrain penalties, and we're going to get a little more sight radius. Now this can be nice if you're playing on a template with a whole bunch of desert area or something like that. But overall, I think it is going to be much more narrow than Ister because the flat movement is just going to benefit you 100% of the time, where this is only going to benefit you sometimes. And I think as a general heuristic, you want your hero to always be of benefit instead of just occasionally being of benefit. So for that reason, I am going to put Leon down into C. The other thing we have to do is make sure we think about this list in a way that is relative and we weigh the heroes against each other. So if Leon was the only movement specialist within the faction, we might be able to put him a little bit higher, but the fact that we have to compare him against Ister means his stock is significantly reduced. And for that matter, they're both might heroes as well. If Leon was maybe a magic hero instead, and we still wanted that movement while also playing magic, then we might be able to make a little bit more of a case for him. But I think overall, Leon is just going to be much worse than Ister. Now, you could make the case that sure, Ister's going to be banned a lot of the time, so you might still want to play a movement specialist that isn't just frequently banned, but I'm not really going to take that into consideration when doing this ranking. I don't think that's fair. It's going to be too meta dependent, too template dependent, etc. So I just have to treat these heroes as if you are going to be able to play them, and then we can base our power scaling off of that. Jonhson up next, and this dude is an absolute Chad. Now, if we were going off style points alone, this dude is all the way up into S tier, but he is still going to be pretty strong. So this is the first unit growth or unit specialist hero that we've come across. There are going to be a few others as we move along, but this guy is going to focus on swordsman. Now, I think the biggest problem here is I don't really know if swordsman is the stack that you want to be building up in massive quantities. Now, don't get me wrong, the swordsman is an absolutely incredible tier 1 unit, especially when you upgrade them to the Sun's Aegis. That defense bonus that you get there is phenomenal, but I just don't know how much you want to be power stacking these because they're so defensive focused, and generally speaking, you want to be a little more proactive with your army, right? Like, defense is good, but you need to kill things, and sometimes the best offense is a good defense anyway because dead enemies don't deal any damage. So Johnny Boy's not going to be super, super high, but he is still going to be pretty high because you can't really go wrong with the unit growth. I think I'm going to put him at the top of B for now, and then we'll have to see how the rest of the list pans out, and we'll move everything around at the end. And for what it's worth, he's going to start the game with basic defense, which, to be fair, is a really good sub-skill, so he's got that going for him as well. Kestrel is another unit growth hero, but this time we're focusing on our tier 2 crossbowmen, and this makes her arguably the best hero in the faction. The fact that you start with a big old stack of 30 crossbowmen is huge, and is going to lead to a ton of early game tempo, whether you're playing PvE or PvP. having a bunch of these makes your early game creeping and clearing out the neutral stacks so much more efficient. And to help with that, you've obviously got all of the extra unit growth and the additional stats that you're going to get. And she starts the game with basic offense to push your damage even more. So turn 1, you can just upgrade these to the Ostringer or the Sharpshooter and just get a whole bunch of damage. Both options are going to be really good. You can't go wrong. And you're just going to have some insane starts here. I think she's easily S tier, and I'm even going to put her in front of Ister for now. The only thing I can say against Kestrel is that she's going to be banned a whole bunch of the time, but we've already talked about it. I can't make that part of my consideration. S tier, and all the way at the top goes Kestrel. Let's talk about Lia The Untethered One. So she's going to be your daylight magic specialist. Now, she does start the game with basic daylight magic, which is nice because you don't have to find it amongst all of the other schools of magic or all of the other sub skills. But to be fair, all of your temple heroes have a pretty good chance of finding daylight magic. I'll leave a little graphic up on screen right now so that you can see all of the weightings and the probabilities, but nonetheless, locking it in off the rip is pretty good. And then she's going to make it so that all of your daylight spells gain an extra level plus another 1 level for every 10 hero levels. So this is easily going to make sure you hit that level 4. I think the leveling of it is pretty excessive, but that's not really the good part. The good part is that she allows you to cast daylight spells multiple times per turn. Now, be careful, you do still need to have thaumaturgy to actually be able to do this. I know a lot of people see this templating and think they instantly have the thaumaturgy ability, but it doesn't work like that. You still need to have thaumaturgy or some other mechanism to allow you to cast multiple spells a turn. But if you do have that, you don't suffer the cooldown or the lockout for each school of magic. So you can cast 2 daylight spells on the same turn if you've got thaumaturgy, and that is incredibly powerful. Daylight is a really good school of magic, and we can never discount this ability to prevent the enemy from using daylight. So if the enemy's trying to use those bless or all of those other incredible skills, then that is really nice. There are also some pretty disgusting combos that you can do with this. I was pretty salty about a game I lost to a temple player who managed to cast Arena's Chosen onto their stack of Archangels in combination with Vengeance. So Arena's Chosen makes it so that the stack cannot fall below 50% of its starting quantity, and then Vengeance means anytime you attack that stack, you take a bunch of magic damage. And then because it was on a stack of Archangels and they had another stack of Archangels, the second one was able to just naturally absorb that buff thanks to its passive ability, and then they were even able to use the active ability to transfer the buffs between the 2 Archangels so that it outscaled any sort of ability that I had to remove the buffs like Wean or the natural decay timer that causes it to fall off over time. So I was just not able to remove this. I had absolutely 0 counterplay, and that was incredibly frustrating, but it was pretty powerful. Now, there are a bunch of conditions around pulling that off, one of them being time. It does take a lot of time to set that up, but if you're playing tournament or something and you can guarantee that you make it to the 3rd round, you've got a good shot of making it happen, and unless your opponent plans for that from the start of the game, there's not too much they can do about it. So I'm going to put Lia all the way up into A. I do think Daylight is very strong overall. I think that is a good place for her. We've got Heretic Avis next. I don't know how you say it, but this guy is going to give us more gems per day, and it is going to scale over time. He's also going to start the game with basic recruitment, which is a pretty nice ability to have. I think where this guy really shines is not as your primary hero, but just having him as part of your overall hero roster, where he can just passively benefit your army by sitting in base, generating gems, generating more army growth, etc. And that is going to be a really strong strategy if you're playing in a multi-hero game, even if he's not the primary star of your combat. So for that reason, I can only rank him so low. I'm going to put him over here in B. I think it is incredibly valuable, even if you can't do that at all in single hero mode. But then even if you are playing single hero and you want to go for, let's say, an early angel build, then this is going to be a reliable way to make that happen. It does get outscaled pretty quickly, but nonetheless, it is going to at least always be of benefit to you. You're never going to suffer from not gaining out of your hero's passive ability. So for that reason, I can only put the econ heroes so low. B tier it is. I'm going to take all of that same logic and apply it to Clarissa, who is going to generate gold instead of gems. I think I do prefer the gems a little bit because they help more with those angel builds, though you do need gold for that as well, so it's a little much and much. Either way though, econ is good but not great, so straight into the back of B. Lord Edgar might be a bit of a basic bitch, but he is still incredibly powerful, so his ability reads friendly creatures gain 20% of his attack and defense as attack and defense, and then you get an additional 5% for every 6 hero levels, so he does scale into the late game, and he starts the game with absolutely 0 additional sub skills. So really simple, but it is incredibly strong. You can't go wrong. I'm a poet and I didn't even realize. I'm going to put this dude all the way up into 80. I think you can be doing better stuff, but you can also be doing much worse stuff. If you just want your guys to hit a little bit harder, then this is a really solid choice. Old mate Julius up next, and this dude is going to start the game with Masterful Healing Water. Now, the normal version of this spell just gives us a little bit of a heal, but it can't revive fallen units, and the Masterful version is going to dispel all of our negative effects at the same time, plus give us a bit of a spell power boost. Personally, this is fairly underwhelming. If you're really worried about Twilight just ending your day, then maybe this is something you can think about, but there's so many better options to do it. In the actual Righteousness sub-skill, you've got an option for a Dispel effect. You've already got Dispel effects within Daylight Magic itself, so there's just better ways to do that. If you don't use any of those and Daylight is just one-click ending you, then that's kind of on you. I don't think you need to be speccing into Masterful Healing Water to get around that, right? Your hero selection should be your game plan, and your game plan just responding to your opponent twilighting you is not a very proactive game plan. So I'm not a big fan of Julius. I'm dropping this dude in D. So we talked a little bit earlier about how if Leon Sticky Fingers was a magic movement specialist, then he would be much more viable and in competition with Ister for one of the best movement specialists in the faction, and that is exactly what we have with Merry Elias. So he's going to be a magic hero who gives us extra use out of our global map spells, and that is just all of them. So if you're using more dimension doors, you can use more second winds, more town portals, etc. And this is going to be very strong, and in many ways it's much stronger than just flat movement, especially if you're playing on a template where you start the game with multiple global map spells. So there are a few templates where you get Dimension Door and Town Portal off the rip, and in those situations, this dude is arguably an auto ban. So this dude is really strong. I'm putting him all the way up into S. It can be template specific, like if you're just on a normal game of Exodus, he's probably not the best hero or an S tier hero, but overall, and we are trying to judge this across all of the formats and do a sort of averaging, so to speak, of their power level, then overall, I do have to give this guy S. I think there's just so many situations where he is really good and he's never going to be bad for you, because even in those Exodus tournament situations, you're still using global map, you're still popping your second wind, and just getting an extra town portal per turn is nice because you do start the game with that as well. So definitely S tier for Elias. I'm really comfortable with that. Zennith is going to be our tier 4 unit specialist, which means we get extra growth and extra stats for our Lightweavers, as well as a big old stack of them to start the game. So very much like Kestrel, this is going to make clearing out all of those early neutral stacks a lot easier. So that's going to get you some early game tempo. Zennith is notably a magic hero as opposed to Kestrel, who was a might hero. So if you want to play magic and you want to go for that range strategy, then Zennith might be the option for you. And she also starts the game with Heavenly Blades as her signature spell. So this has some cute combos where you can buy yourself a bunch of the Ostringers, split them out into single stacks, and then if you level up Heavenly Blades so that it affects all of your army, then you can just be sort of shooting at the enemy and dealing that pure damage with every single shot, and that makes clearing those low level weak early stacks super easy. But the complication is you have to sort of level the spell up anyway, so you already have to do some progressing, and it kind of just complicates this system that is pretty easy for Temple anyway, because you've already got so much ranged advantage in the early game. So I don't know if you really need to be going for that, but it is a thing you can do, and Zennith is really strong overall, so I'm going to put her all the way up into the middle of A. So Keandra is going to be our final unit specialist, this time giving us extra cavalry growth, and the cavalry are a fantastic way to play Temple, to be honest. This is sort of the other way you can play Temple if you don't want to do all of the range stuff and just build straight down the path that gets you to the angels. This is going to allow you to get a little more in your opponent's face. Cavalry have a ton of speed and a ton of initiative. It's just a really good strategy overall, and this is going to be the best hero that enables it. You can get it online really early, and for that reason, I am going to be putting Keandra all the way up into S tier because I do think this strategy is very strong. Prince Weasley, or Pip for short, is going to be this faction's XP specialist. So he's going to give us an additional attribute point as well as 5% XP for every 2 hero levels. And he is, of course, going to start the game with basic insight for even more XP. Now, he does also start off with early start, which is a really good spell, in my opinion. This allows you to just move your units up in the turn order, and it can turn the tide of a lot of different battles. We've known this strategy has been really strong for a long time, ever since we were spamming it in the demo. So I'm going to put Pip all the way up into S tier. It is a pretty boring strategy, but you do out-farm your opponent's stats pretty quickly. Nadir is a really interesting one in my opinion, and he is a bit of an outlier for the faction. So he's going to start the game with Masterful Vulnerability, which causes the target to always take maximum damage. So the normal version of this spell causes the target to take 20% extra damage from all sources, and this does pair well with Daylight Magic, to be honest, because Daylight Magic is going to make you do more damage, and then he's going to cause the target to take extra damage, so you get that nice synergy there. The problem with Nadir, I think, is he's just the perfect case of a hero who is pretty good, but everything else is just better. So I think I am going to drop him up the top of C here, and he really is just suffering from all of these other heroes being so good. That's kind of his biggest problem, is just everyone else is better, and he's just kind of mediocre. Like, so it is a really strong spell, that's for sure, but I think everything else happening here is just a little bit stronger, especially when you average it out across all of the different game modes and all of the different applications. I'm comfortable putting him at the top of C, but I think if I am underrating any of the heroes in this tier list, Nadir might be the one, but for now, that's where I'm going to put him. And speaking of heroes who I have underrated in the past, old Lord Mandall is definitely one of them, but this guy is going to make your early game progress so much more efficient. You are going to shed so fewer armies over time to those early neutral stacks, and this is going to allow you to take on certain fights that you would just not even be able to think about under normal circumstances, because you can build into this heroic strike strategy so well. You can get multiple heroic strikes per turn, and you can scale up the damage super efficiently. So for that reason, this dude is going all the way up into S. I am underrating him no longer. All right, so we've got just a few more to go, and Vesper is next. This guy is going to start the game with Masterful Blessing, which is going to cause the target to always deal maximum damage. So this is very similar to Nadir, who made the target always take maximum damage, and you would cast it on your enemies instead of your own units and buff them up. But I do think Vesper synergizes with the faction much better, because temple units like to be buffed up, especially with the angels, right? Who can just spread those buffs across your team and absorb buffs from your other units. So I think the fact that Vesper plays better into the faction strengths means he does get to be rated higher, even though they sound so similar in theory. Vesper plays out better in practice, and for that reason, I'm going to put him into the middle of B. Anastasia The Meek is going to be our second to last hero, and this one is underwhelming for a few reasons. So she's going to start the game with Masterful Arena's Touch, and this version of the spell is going to increase the target's speed by 1, as well as give her some extra spell power. So the normal version of this spell is going to make it so that friendly creatures gain 1 initiative and 10% maximum HP, which is a pretty good spell, right? The problem is, I don't really think we need the Masterful version, because within Temple, you're kind of just playing a lot of ranged units anyway, so you're not just charging out there at your enemy, and if you are, you're doing it with your cavalries and your griffins, who already have very high initiative and very high speed anyway, so you don't really need this. You're better off going for some other buff and then just using those units anyway. I just don't really see where this has a place in an overall strategic archetype that is very strong. So I think that's the biggest downside with Anastasia. The spell does read nice in theory, but it just doesn't have that many very high-end applications. She does start the game with basic thaumaturgy, and that is an incredible sub-skill, but that's about the best thing that she has going for her, and your magic users are gonna end up finding your thaumaturgy anyway. So I do have to put this all the way down into D. Whether or not she goes in front or behind of Julius, I'm not too sure, but both of them are pretty lackluster and overall underwhelming. All right, and lucky last, we get to talk about Aeos the Salty One. So this guy is going to give friendly creatures +1 morale, and then they also have a higher chance of triggering the morale event. So you get 2% chance per morale point, and then for every 4 levels, you get an extra 1% on top of that. Now, this is going to be a ton of fun. Temple already has very high morale and a lot of morale synergy. So building into this is just going to be incredibly frustrating for your opponents. You are going to be triggering morale all of the time and taking those extra turns, which is a very strong strategy overall. Getting extra turns is kind of just like having an extra stack or a free shadow army for your units. And if you can do it reliably, you're not even gambling at a certain point. I mean, you always, of course, are. Sometimes it's just not going to go your way, but a lot of the time it is. So this guy is easily S tier as well, and this S tier is looking stacked. We've got a lot of strong temple heroes like I already talked about. We could maybe putting him in A, and now that we've got our entire list, I kind of just want to go through this quickly and make sure we're happy with everything. I think he has to stay up in B to be in S, to be honest. Like, I think this is just how it has to be. Ordering these around, you could maybe bring Mandall up here, probably keep Kestrel at the front. Depending on the template, Elias could be higher, but I'm going to keep him back here because it is super template dependent. You could make a case for Edgar up in S, but I'm going to leave it there. Maybe this could come down. Maybe Johnny could come up. Like, I could see worlds like this, but I think I'm actually pretty happy with it. Nadir could maybe come up here. I don't know. I think I'm pretty happy with this. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. What am I underrating? What am I overrating? I love to have these conversations. I don't think I'm going to be right about everything. That would be pretty absurd to expect. Either way, though, this is just a little bit of fun. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next time. Have a good one.